the military, I think, is the most challenging career switch in the world.
But if you go in there and you leave thinking you know it all because you've been whatever rank in the military, I think you'll fail very quickly. But I think one of the things is, when you are leaving, don't expect because you're a veteran in the world to give you everything. You've still got to work your backside off in some ways harder than you did in the military.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Mission to Mission podcast. This week we're going to be speaking to Neil Harrison, MBE. You got to add that in. Neil was in the army, British Army, for 24 years. He's quite close home for me. He was an aircraft engineer in the REME for 10 of that, and then he actually did a career switch himself into cyberspace, core intelligence. Got out of the military in 2019 and went to Summerford Associates, was there for 2 years, and then moved on to Ebury. He's 3 years into Ebury, fintech, fast moving, high pace, no prisoners, for me a really cool business. So I'm looking forward to unpacking all of this, Neil, and learning a bit more about you.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, pleased to be here. Good to talk through it.
Do you want to just give a bit more of a intro to yourself then?
Yeah, so let's do it from the military side first. So I did 10 years in the REME to start with. Started out in Wattisham Airfield with many others. 10 years, all the operational tours, Iraqs and everything else that went with it. A couple of Northern Islands. Then moved from there after 10 years into the intelligence corps. I moved across as a sergeant actually, which came as a surprise to some. But at the time it was going to be more desk-based as you went to artificer or artisan anyway. So I figured I could go and find a different job with lots of different desks, which was the intelligence corps, and gave me the opportunity and also for progression. Left the intelligence corps as a late entry captain. That was after being the corps sergeant major as well in there for a couple of years. And then more recently, as you said, Summerford Associates, working as a software in the software reseller space, set up a business consulting capability in Summerford. And then after 2 years, actually through the network, I was speaking with David Siriano on the back of actually looking at software sales. And he mentioned about a couple of roles that came up in Ebury in the fintech space. So yeah, I moved across, went back in-house into the information security world. And I've been in Ebury for the last 3 years. Initially went in there across as a manager because they didn't have any head of roles at the time. But then after 12 months, I promoted up to head of, took over the information security side and a number of different functions, and I've been there for 3 years. So it's been quite an interesting ride actually.
And what you talk about the network work, so people listening to this aren't going to understand who David Siriano is. Can you just give a bit more on that? Like, how did you know David Siriano before?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting actually. So David Siriano now is Chief Operating Officer at Ebury. He's just switched last week. But previously, I worked in Germany with him and a couple of others are at Ebury at the moment. So David Siriano originally was a corporal working for me in Germany. And then when I left, we actually did a switch. So I now work for him. So I was the company sergeant major in Germany at the time. David Siriano was a corporal. And I think one of the things is not being too proud when you leave and realise that, what the rank once you leave the military is, it doesn't exist. I mean, you've got your experience still, but don't be too proud in what you're trying to achieve when you get out. There's still... David Siriano, like I say, he left 5 years before me, and then on the back of that, we've still got to, reach those milestones when you get out, if you like, going as high as you can most of the time. But yeah, once you're out, it's a different world. You can't. There's no, defined career ladder. You're on your own, and it's use your network and your and the opportunities available to you.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, isn't it? I was speaking to a guy at AWS the other day who said that they just tipped up for their induction for AWS, and his company sergeant major was on the same induction that he was on going into AWS, and it's and they didn't know, they didn't know that they were both going on it. So it's funny, isn't it, how it kind of pans out?
And it's actually a really, especially in London as well. It's quite a small world, so the network's really important actually, and just staying in touch with all your connections. Not every single week clearly, but just now and again, just touching base and keeping that network alive, really, because you never know when you're going to need to use it, or alternatively when other people might need need you for a bit of help.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's always about making sure that you're giving as much as you're taking from a networking perspective, isn't it? So,
definitely.
you've been in Ebury now longer than you've been in any other civilian role.
Yep.
What is it that fulfills you with? I say fintech, but there are lots of different fintechs. I know Ebury is a fast-growing, high-paced environment, and it's fintech. But actually, Ebury is a company within itself with its own culture. Like, what's made you stay there for the period that you've been there for?
I think one is the culture there. Like you say, it is fast-paced, which at times is hard. But I'll be honest, it also keeps it interesting. So I did look at big banks when I was first leaving the military. And I'll never say I won't work ever in a big bank, but it just didn't look, it almost looked like you were stovepiped. You did one job and that was your job, whereas in Ebury, there's a number of different things that you can do. And if you see something that's not quite right, you can change it very quickly. There's not massive amounts of bureaucracy and red tape to go through. You literally change it. Admittedly, if you get it wrong, you can correct that, but it's... But yeah, it's very quick to change if you see something not right. And again, as a team, generally the team's ideas are listened to. And again, if it's a good idea, it'll get through. There's meritocracy there. So if you're doing well, as I said, I went in as a manager purely because there was no more senior roles at the time. But yeah, within 12 months, I'd moved up basically on the back of my previous experience. The social connections there are really good. It's an international company. So for example, I'm out seeing one of my teams next week in Malaga, so I'll be flying out to Malaga next week because one of my managers is coming in from Brazil. So again, it's an international company. It's so diverse, lots going on, really fast-paced, which again is pros and cons. But it's no one day is necessarily the same. So it's really, really interesting. It keeps you on your toes. So yeah, you don't get bored, and I think that's probably why I've been there for 3 years really, because I think had I been elsewhere, I may have got bored with then. And again, coming out of the military, used to moving every 2 years. And I think one of the dangers is, especially once you get into Civvy Street, is that, you get to that 2 year point and you start getting itchy feet and you feel you've got to move, where actually, quite a lot of the time, if you just stay in that role for a little bit longer, that's when some of the opportunities start to get there, because it can take 12 to 24 months to actually settle into a company properly. So you've got to give it a little bit of time, and especially when you're first leaving, give yourself a little bit of breathing space to figure out what it is you actually want. And also on top of that, if you leave and something isn't quite right, you don't have to stay there, like from loyalty with the, in terms of loyalty and things. If you go into a job when you first leave the military, it's not right, then go and find something else, do something different.
Yeah.
Don't feel you have to, whole military is the values and standards things and loyalty. I mean, once you're outside, again, you're on your own. So you haven't got a career structure to work to. If it's not working for you, find another opportunity using your network and, some of the things like Redeployable, Tech Vets, all these other things that are out there to use to actually assist you in going on whatever journey it is you want to take.
It's challenging, isn't it? Because I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to find the perfect thing straight away. And the reality is the likelihood is they're not going to find the perfect thing straight away.
Yep.
I talk about it all the time. If you think about people career switching generally, a teacher moving into something else, or the military, I think, is the most challenging career switch in the world. And I think it's the most challenging career switch because, you hear people talk about moving house is the most stressful thing in the world. Well, you're moving house, you're moving kids' schools, you're moving your family, you're moving your friendship group, you're moving the institution that you've been in for, you're translating skills. It is the most complex, in my opinion, career switch. Now, that means the likelihood is you don't know everything in civilian life, so you've got to kind of piece your way there over time, right?
There's a little bit, but what I would say is de-risk it. So, don't have a one bad day in the military and then decide you're going to go in the next day and sign off. Actually plan it out beforehand. And I'll give you an example, and just my example is what I did. That doesn't necessarily mean it's right for everybody. But I'd, using the Chartered Management Institute, things that you can get through the military, one of the exercises I actually had on one of those courses was developing a 5 or 10 year plan. And that was one thing that I did probably about 7 years before I left the military, but I actually put a 5 to 10 year plan in place. On the back of that, I did one of the degrees with Staffordshire University, Bachelor of Science in Cyber Technology, because I could see things were going down the cyber route and technology was obviously becoming a big thing. Crazily enough, at the time, I took on doing a degree when I was an RSM, which was a lot of hard work. But again, if you're wanting to succeed, you've got to put the effort in, because otherwise, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well, sort of thing. And so the degree there, I think, based on how much degrees cost outside, I think that cost me £500 using my enhanced learning credits. And then on the back of that, again, looking around at what I wanted to do when I left the military, I also saw that a lot of people were getting master's degrees. So I also completed an MBA as well on the back of that. And again, that was using my enhanced learning credits, and again, cost me about £1,500. So I think, just using what the military's got there, but yeah, planning well in advance of when you leave and having a rough idea where you want to get to. And I had a 5-year plan, which was to either commission and go down the commissioning route, which I did initially to start with, or the alternative was to actually leave, but at the 10-year point, regardless, the 10-year point was either to be Lieutenant Colonel in the military or was to be a head of or a director in Civvy Street. So I've actually achieved what I wanted to do in the 10-year part now, and I actually need to develop another 5 to 10-year plan now to figure out where I want to go. And that's actually quite challenging now once you're out again, because you can go in any direction almost.
Yeah, and you don't know what opportunities are around the corner, internally or externally, right?
Yeah.
What this is kind of a little bit off topic, but at MBA,
yep,
we pay one of our guys, actually, a guy called Tom Gaston, parachute regiment captain, got out. We're paying him for his MBA at the moment. It's really important to him when he got out that he did an MBA.
Yep.
I hear different, in the US, MBAs are really, really, really important in a lot of cases. But I hear different reports that, it's worth the time, it's not worth the time, blah, 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 blah. Would you say an MBA was worth the time for you?
For me personally, I would say it was. But I picked an MBA that was of interest to me, and I think that's a big thing. One, it can act for some as a, the HR sift ticking the box to say you've got a master's degree. But I'll be honest, because there's so much effort required to do it, I think you've got to pick one that is of interest as well. So whilst it will help with HR and things, pick it in a subject that you would like. So, my MBA I did in innovation and leadership. The innovation side I found quite interesting because I was interested in that anyway. Leadership side tied in perfectly with the military piece. And then for my final dissertation, again, because I was looking at more the technology side and how things were going in terms of technology and that artificial intelligence type space, my final dissertation was actually on how machine learning can enhance business outcomes. So, but I still use the military as a basis for that. So how can machine learning enhance business outcomes in the military? And that was because I still had all my research material and contacts in the military to use to be able to do that. But I think, I personally found it useful. And I use things from that, not all the time, but I delve into things from that and my degree and other, knowledge base, if you like, that you build up over time to build that bigger knowledge base for yourself. So I don't think it's it's not a one-off thing that you do. I think it's something you do and build onto the top of your other experience. And it also, if you've not done it before, it also teaches you how to plan better, I think. So it teaches you how to plan projects out and things better than you maybe would have done if you haven't before. Albeit, I must admit, there's a lot of planning goes on in the army, obviously. So you do quite a lot of planning during that time. So, but for me, it was worthwhile. Again, it won't fit for everybody, and some people, if they want to do a master's, should pick like a Master of Science or whatever else. But again, figure out where you want to get in that 5-10 year plan, and then pick something that, one, you're interested in, but two, is going to help you get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, I'm just generally interested in the topic. I wouldn't be against doing one myself. I feel like running a business is like doing an MBA as you going. But I imagine I haven't done an MBA, but I can see why people want to go and do it.
And again, I think with that, there's other there's forces charities out there, especially for setting up your own businesses. And I'll throw a name out there like Ren Kapoor. She runs charities and things that help companies build, so that that you don't necessarily need to take on, especially if you're setting up your own. And I've not set up my own business, but I imagine that a lot of your time is taken up just with making sure you're getting over your hurdles, paying your bills, paying your staff, and everything else. You don't necessarily want to be taking on the massive burden of a massive MBA dissertation of like writing 90 pages plus. To take it on. I
can't do that now. No, I'm trying to juggle my family. I've had to cut my friends.
So it might be, it might be the MBA maybe in the future, but again, once you're leaving the military, and again, depending on what time, quite a lot of the time you may have the experience anyway that an MBA would give you. So arguably you're potentially learning stuff on the job, whereas actually rather than doing the theory side, you're doing it at practical straight away.
Just making a few more mistakes. So you got out into Somerford Associates in a different type of role, and then you went back to kind of your roots. Probably not your roots, because your roots is aircraft engineering, but the intelligence side. How easy was it to start like translating your skills across from the military, and why did you then end up back in where you originally started?
I'll be honest, completely through network. So in Somerford Associates, I was speaking to, again, other ex-intelligence corps people who were working in there. And I base a lot of my purpose and reason for doing things generally is based on company culture and ethos. So I'll be honest, I'm quite happy doing almost any job as long as the people are out. I've got surrounded by decent people, and we all roughly know where we're going and working together to, sort of achieve a common aim. So I was told that Somerford Associates was a good place to be. I'd heard about it through some people that I'd been working with the Inc. Corps. And so again, I had a look at that against others. And it was actually the first job I was offered. And again, that's not necessarily the right road to take for some. But at the time for me leaving, I needed to buy a house, pay a mortgage, make sure the family was sorted out. So I just needed to make sure I had a job to start with. And where better to go than somewhere where you know some of the people in the business already. It was quite a small business. And almost like a bit of a family type feel, if you like. So whereas in a big organisation, arguably you might have more support, but you're a very small cog in a very big wheel. So again, it depends what you want, and again, everybody's different. So for me, I didn't want to go to the likes of JP Morgan, etc. straight away. For me, it was more about a little company, decent ethos, and paid me enough money to pay the bills. And I think that's the other thing. It's what do you actually need when you leave, So just because one person's done something doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you personally. Don't necessarily copy what others have done.
I spoke to on episode 3. I spoke to a chap called Paul Godonis, and he went from an enterprise into the startup world, and he talks about it feels like you're in a unit. It's like more you can see the change you're making as an individual. And how that's super important. But a lot of people don't have that mindset when they first get out, like you did, like smaller business, because they see that as more of a risk. When ultimately, actually, it's probably just as risky to be in a big business these days at the moment with a lot of the restructuring that's happening and things, So
and I think if you plan it out and de-risk it and just know what you're going into, I think. And again, if you work, what I've found personally is if you're prepared to work hard, you generally succeed wherever you go. So. But I think one of the things is, when you are leaving, don't expect because you're a veteran in the world to give you everything. You've still got to work your backside off in some ways harder than you did in the military. And that was the thing, moving to Ebury as an example in the middle. Ebury's almost and in between the big organisations and the startup, it's still got a startup mentality. But at about 1,600 people now, you're sort of in that middle road where it's still fast-paced. However, you've still got the, some of the benefits and the support that you might not get in a full-on startup.
I'm intrigued by, obviously, they're a client of ours, right? And I've got a little bit of a look under the covers of Ebury in terms of the culture and things. And I think with my mentality, I like the competitiveness, I like the fast pace. And Ebury strikes me as it is a startup, but a really big startup where shit happens. Do you think in that environment you would have been comfortable if you weren't going back to your subject matter? Your original, you're in intelligence, you've gone into Ebury in an area that you intimately know, right? Obviously, you're learning all the time, but do you think it would have been more challenging to live in that environment if you were also learning a new trade as well?
I think if you're going with the right mindset. I think if you don't, I think you would massively struggle. I think it's being prepared to learn. I think if you go in there thinking you know it all, I'll be honest, that goes for any job. But if you go in there and you leave thinking you know it all because you've been whatever rank in the military, I think you'll fail very quickly. I think it's a case of continually learning, and I'm still learning every single day, which I like to say is why it's interesting. And in terms of the fast pace, one of the things that I find the military taught me very well was to be able to figure out how to prioritise. So, I can be dealing with something 1 minute, and then, for example, definitely from a security operations perspective, there might be an incident coming. You've just got to completely drop what you were doing to focus on something else. I think coming from a military background, that's very useful, and I think that's where, in terms of startups and like Ebury, which is sort of like say in the middle road looking to IPO now, but still startup mentality. I think that's where veterans can add real value, is where they can prioritise and also figure out how to do things that they may not be trained in. So we'll find a way of doing it, so we adapt and overcome to actually get to where we need to. We know where we need to get to, and we just figure out a way of doing it. And there's not, again, because in startups especially, there's no necessarily right or wrong way of doing it, because it's the first time it's been done in some circumstances. So you document it as you go, and that by the time you finish doing that is then your procedure for the next time it happens. And some of it's learning on the fly, which again it keeps it interesting. Ebury's not quite there now because we've moved forward in the 3 years I've been there. The company's obviously moved on and we've built some of these things out. But yeah, when I first arrived in there was very little in terms of procedures and policies and processes and things. We've put all that in the last 3 years, which has been incredible, really. Which is really interesting because you've talked to me about being like really planful. Like you talk about, I did this degree and then I did my MBA, and you've spent a lot of time thinking and planning to get out. Yep. And then you've moved into an environment, especially 3 years ago. I mean, I don't know, the business was Ebury was like maybe 800 people, 600 people at that point, was it? What was it? It'll been about 1,000. So I mean, we've probably grown about 600 in the last 3 years. Oh yeah. Okay, so the business has changed, but you've then gone into an environment that's not as planful because it's a bit more unpredictable. See, I mean, you would say that, but you do still need to plan. So whilst some of it you have to do, you still need to have an end goal where you get into. So you still got a strategy. So for example, when I joined there, one of the things that the company wanted to do was obtain something called ISO 27001 certification. So that's still the end goal. It just, because of where you are and lacking some of these policies and things, it just means you've got to divert slightly. Yeah. You've still got the same end goal and you still need to plan to get there. Just on that route, sometimes you have to divert slightly, so it's more of you're sort of meandering around to get there rather than just going in a straight line, if you like. Sometimes it's a bit more clunky. Structured chaos. Sometimes. Sometimes. And what you've done you're doing all these things, and you're clearly ambitious. You talk about what you wanted to do in your 10-year goal. What is it that makes you tick? What do you think, like you as an individual? So for me, me personally, it's the family side. So, and it's making sure that, I provide the best I can for my family, really. So it's not necessarily, and again, everybody's different, but it's not necessarily about me personally. I'm also not massively driven by money. I mean, I don't do too badly at the moment, but it's not about the money. Again, it's about the culture and the people that I'm surrounded by, and feeling that I'm doing some sort of good. But also making sure that my family's well supported, my son's got the best opportunities I can give him, and all that side of things. And that's what gets me up in the morning and commuting into London, which I'm not a massive fan of. However, I see my son doing really well at school and all the rest of it, and that's what motivates me to get out of bed in the morning. A role model. Yeah. In some respects, it is. I think I always look back at what I think one of my best traits is how hard I work. Yep. And my dad used to do shift work. I always remember. I don't remember an awful lot about that time, but my dad. We used to go and pick him up at 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. My mum had to get me in the car because she couldn't leave me at home. We only had one car, and it's like that graft. I think you learn from. Yeah. Someone talked about it in an earlier episode. Is like you learn from early on, right? Like in your life, like the values and the way that you are. So I think that having that role model because I think about this with myself as well, that having that role model shows them. No, I'd agree with that, I think. And I don't tell this to too many people, but I was in the army, but both my parents initially were in the RAF. I don't actually admit that to too many people, but that'll go out now. That'll go out now. But yeah, I don't admit to that to too many people. But yeah, so they started out from military background. And then my dad went into, insurance salesman, and then set up his own business. So again, I'd agree with that to some extent. You've just seen them grafting all the way through to provide the best they can for me. And then again, me to saying, and my dad had always said to me, he's like, whatever you do, just try and do better than I've done. So, and that was the thing. So that's all I've done is just do my best and see what we can do. I don't think, and I say that to my son now, I don't think anybody can ask any more of that. As long as you've done your best, even if that means you fail and you've got to go again, but as long as you tried your best, I don't think anybody can say anything against you. Yeah. No, I completely agree with that, and it's a recurring theme on it. What makes you tick, and a lot of the people's answers is
family.
Yeah. And then again, going back a long time, when I was, I had like a Saturday job where I worked at Marks and Spencer's. And I remember when I said, when I was going to join the military, there was somebody in there that said I wouldn't do it and I wouldn't make it. And I still remember to this day that was one thing that motivated me. Every time somebody was difficult in basic training or anything else, I just remember that back to that one comment where somebody said, "You're not good enough to do it." And that was one thing that kept spurring me on as well. And I was like,
fuck that person.
And I think I was 14 at the time. So, I mean, now 46, looking back now, I mean, these sort of things stick with you. And it's, again, pushing you forward to keep going.
Yeah. Someone's opinion, isn't it?
Yeah.
It literally is someone's opinion. And it matters very little.
But it's good. But use that as ammunition to get yourself where you want to go to,
Yeah. Yeah, when you got to use, whatever drives you on to do more, So we always leave the podcast with some actionable takeaways. And I've pre-prepared you with these, so hopefully you've come.
I've got my crib cards in front of me.
Yeah, you got crib cards. I love that.
Love
that. So go on, hit me with some actionable takeaways.
So the takeaways, and I've thought especially for service leavers here, because again, things have moved on thankfully since I left. But the three takeaways I would have: one for the purpose side of things that you look at. Figure out what is actually important to you personally. Just because other people have done things before you and that's worked out for them, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the right path for you. So figure out what the right path for you is and work on that. And one thing I did when I was before I left the military was read a book called What Colour Is Your Parachute by a guy called Boll, B-O-L-L-E. And by doing that, I figured out what was most important to me, where I wanted to live, how much I needed to earn, and actually did that planning piece before I left, and do that early to figure out what it is actually important to you and what your purpose is. So, because for some people, the motivation will be money. So, I mean, it's not the case for me, but it will be for others. So, yeah, purpose-wise, figure out what your individual purpose is. In terms of progression, as I said, my recommendation would be to do work on a 5 to 10 year plan. That'll give you your progression, your stepping stones, and everything else. And for service leavers, I appreciate it can be quite a scary time. But if you've done that 5 to 10 year plan and you've done it well and thought it through, leaving the military will just be a stepping stone in that path. So and that's all it is. It's just almost like a speed bump and a thing, a milestone to get past. And use opportunities available to you like Redeployable, Tech Vets, and the Forces Employment Charity. A lot of things that are available now that weren't 5 years ago. Use them, and they're all free. And then the last one was challenges. And I've sort of flipped this around a little bit, but don't leave it till the last minute. Again, it goes back to that planning side, but don't leave it till the last minute because then it will be a challenge. So plan early and de-risk it. So know where you want to get to, a rough idea. And again, you don't have to go into the right industry immediately, but have somewhere where like location-wise, how much money you need to earn, etc., and just figure out what the basics are you need, and then after that, figure it out once you go if you need to. But yeah, just de-risk it a little bit and plan early.
You said de-risk a lot in this. Yeah. You've said de-risk a lot.
And again, some people have got higher risk thresholds than others. So for me personally, again, I had a young family. I was leaving after 24 years service. Admittedly, you've got a little bit of a pension in the back to support you a little bit. But yeah, for me, I still had a family to think about. So for me, I had to de-risk it a little bit. Whereas obviously other people, if you haven't got the same sort of commitments, maybe you can be a little bit more risk averse. Yeah,
amazing. Do you know what the one thing that when I speak to people keeps coming up is that looking at yourself and spending the time to actually analyze what you really, really want in your life. It's just for more and more people that I speak to are doing really well. And well doesn't mean they need to be earning 250k a year. Well means that they are progressing with whatever they want to do based on what their values and their purpose is all about, right? And it's just that time to reflect on and sit down and just take some time to think about what's important to you is, I think, something that I didn't do.
No, definitely. And just what's success for one person isn't necessarily success for another. And again, it comes back to, what is important to you. So again, personally, as much as I would like to be earning 250,000, because money does help still, it's not the be all and end all. And I know how much work I would need to do to be earning that sort of money. So again, it depends on what the person wants.
It's like a relationship, isn't it? There's some sacrifices that you've got to take. You've got to, there's give and take, and you can't have the house by the sea with a huge garden and a blah and pay 250 grand for it.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to. There are always going to be some compromises with these things. So yeah, amazing, Neil. I really, really, really thank you for taking the time to come in and speak with us.
No, it's been a pleasure. No, thanks very much for having me.
So if you liked the episode, please leave us a 5-star review and share with your friends. If you want to meet more amazing people like Neil, join our community, and I will see you next time.